The Towers, one of the few remaining testaments to the Orokin's power. Capable of withstanding the void and self-sufficient defense systems, they still stand as symbols of dominance and power. But are the towers as simple as they seem? Answers to the questions about their use in the Old War may have finally become clear with the Plains of Eidolon reveal, and the truth behind their nature may fit into many other facets like a piece of a puzzle. It would seem that despite their appearance, the towers are made from a biological material, one that bleeds, grows, and dies like any other. The Austral Reclamation colony is home to one of the few remaining living towers in the system, and has no doubt raised questions as to why it was formed in such a gruesome manner. The answer is surprisingly simple. In war times, a biological building block that can self-repair and even serve as musculature to support the Orokin's outlandish designs would be extremely invaluable. But even more importantly, it could be the key in resisting the sentient threat. The greatest asset the sentients had was their ability to assimilate technology. Thinking, living, adapting machines that opposed the principles the Orokin had established, their dominance over the technology of old proved insurmountable. But the Orokin too adapted. They fashioned towers of flesh and porcelain, not circuits and steel, and resisted the sentients with forms they could not understand. It is quite possible that the flesh seen in the towers is similar to technocyte, but docile. Perhaps an alternate strain that was developed to be passive instead of aggressive with its adaptive properties, only filling gaps and not growing outside its intended boundaries. It is possible that over time, should enough natural decay appear, the growth could become uncontrollable. This may be why the derelict towers and Orokin ships are overrun with twisting growths that are reminiscent of technocyte strands, but different. Not aggressive, but merely snaking their way through the physical space they can explore unhindered by Orokin watchdogs, much like a plant. If this were the case, it may be that arboriform, the energy-channeling substance used to lace Lua together, is of a similar nature, perhaps even the same. It may be that with its energy source long depleted, the arboriform returns to a more fleshy appearance and no longer appears crystalline and white. I believe the two are a separate substance, designed for a similar purpose, but the comparison is worth note. Regardless, if this flesh within the towers is designed to be an adaptive, shapeable substance, it brings to mind something similar. Forma. The building block used to shape our warframes and weapons, used to alter objects in physical ways. If this were the case, it would make the technocyte connection even stronger, as its ability to warp our frames with ease would make perfect sense. This also brings up an interesting connection to the Orokin's past. Exilis, the primordial forma. Clearly of sentient nature, it may have existed as the primary building material used by Orokin long before the Old War. However, when the threat of sentient technology became more apparent, it was discarded in favor of the more natural forma. Tying this all together, it also raises questions about the Neural Sentry and other Orokin Old War relics. Perhaps the Neural Sentry is some sort of primitive mind installed within the living towers, used to assimilate invaders and control the ship's functions. Perhaps it is also a cephalon, as previously theorized. If the arboriform and tower flesh connection is true as well, this may also lend credence to the theory that the void is being used to corrupt unwanted guests. By drawing on the void through its biological veins of arboriform, the towers can exert influence over those it is designed to dominate. Unchecked growth in turn leads to bursts of rampancy in the form of void fissures, allowing the tower to further exert its control outside of its space within the void. Further expounding on the tower's ability to exist within the void is the possibility that they utilize impossible space. As the wreckage on Uranus indicates, the tower vessels we explore are potentially far smaller than they should be. Steve himself has indicated that Orokin structures function on values of impossible space, and this would be further strengthened by the tower flesh to technocyte connection. Because technocyte is capable of channeling the energies of the void, as seen with the warframes, it is very likely that this docile strain was used to create impossible pockets of space within the tower's wombs, giving the Orokin an advantage over the sentients who could not withstand the energy of the void without consequence. Following this logic, it would indicate that many other Orokin structures are also formed from biological material, most notably the Orbiter. The Orbiter is described as working on a minor scale of impossible space itself. Further, it is easily concealed within the void by Ortis and his mastery over the ship. Further, Orden Karras describes his first experience in the Orbiter as if it was a new body, describing the chambers as lungs filling with air. While this initially seemed like a metaphorical statement, and it could very well be one, a single throwaway line within the chains of HeroQuest begins to form doubts. Ortis has a slip of the tongue, and describes that the Orbiter is bleeding. Now, before I end this video, I'm going to do a quick bit of speculation on the as-of-yet released Umbra frames, as there is not enough of note to make an entire video on, but I'm sure it is a topic of interest. With what little we do know of the Umbras, their nature is beginning to become more clear, yet there are still potentially divergent possibilities. From the way Ballas speaks in the reveal trailer, as well as the ambient sounds of life support, it indicates that the Umbra are of a more sinister nature than we ever believed. While initially, the thought was that the Umbra frames were Tenno who had rejected their return to sleep after the slaughter at the Terminus, it now seems that the Tenno are not a factor at all. Sacrifice, the loss of life, self, yet a chance for another. In relation to the Warframes, this calls to mind the actions taken by our own frame in the second dream, a brief flicker of thought in a time of dire need. While it is still shrouded in darkness, it would seem that the Umbra frames are frames with sense of self, reason, perhaps designed by the Orokin to aid in war efforts when the Tenno alone were not enough. From the way Ballas speaks, it would seem that the Orokin coerced those in vulnerable positions to sacrifice themselves to become Umbra. Living weapons. This is potentially further strengthened by the reactions of the Rhino prototype in the Prime Codex entry. Once thought to be a rampaging technocyte golem, it could very well be that it was a subsumed individual wrought with agony and grief, lashing out at their creators. Again, while their exact relationship to the Tenno of old, and more importantly, our Tenno, is unclear, it would seem likely that the Umbra frames are those that will not idly allow themselves to be controlled by our transference. But, as with many things in the Warframe universe, these are mostly uncertain, and should not be taken as the only interpretation. But until the time comes when we have all the facts, this is what we know.